Good evening, everyone. Welcome in, welcome in. We're so happy to have you tonight. My name is Jennifer Raymond. I'm one of the physician liaisons here that works with Dr. Zimon. We're super excited to have you join our webinar, and it is perfect timing as it's Breast Cancer Awareness Month, but we decided to open up tonight's webinar to everyone with cancer. And on that note, I was just going to quickly go over some housekeeping, not issues, housekeeping things that I like to talk about before I introduce our three speakers. We do have a chat box located in the right-hand corner of people's screens. We encourage everyone to put as many questions as you'd like. I'll actually be monitoring the chat box and can stop the presenters as questions come in. So please go ahead and put as many questions in as you want. The other thing I wanted to say is at the end, we'll also take questions if you happen to have questions at the end of our webinar. And without further ado, I'd like to go over and introduce our first speaker, will be Kristen Darcy. Kristen, we know because she works with Resolve New England. She's actually a volunteer there. She's a longtime volunteer. She works with Kate over at Resolve. She believes in giving back to an organization that helped her during her own family building journey. She's a cancer survivor of breast cancer and infertility. Kristen brings her strength and passion as a Resolve New England peer support group leader. Amen to you, Kristen. She currently leads cancer and fertility. And Kristen lives in Massachusetts with her family. And I've actually met our next speaker is going to be Kristen Darcy. We've done some other webinars with Kristen as well. She is an author, but in addition to being an author, Kristen offers coaching services to individuals challenged with infertility and or facing divorce. She speaks at workshops and conferences around the country. She's been highlighted in national publications and broadcast media, including NBC, Women's Health Magazine, PBS Health Week, in the Boston Globe. And last but certainly not least is Dr. Alison Zimon. Dr.
Oops. Well, maybe I'll step in very briefly, and I'll introduce myself as we've lost Jen. So I'm a reproductive endocrinologist. I work at CCRM, Fertility Boston, and I'm one of the co-founders of our organization. Oh, yeah, I'll let you go. We lost you, Jen. So I stepped in. You were going in and out on your connection. So I stepped in and introduced, but I'll hand it over to you again.
Goodness, I'm sorry. Can you see me now?
We can see you. We were losing you. We lost your audio for a bit and you froze up.
Okay, sorry about that.
No problem.
So can I give you an introduction? Because I feel like sometimes you're so humble and I'm so proud of you. So Dr. Zimon is medical director and co-founder of CCRM Fertility. We're located in Chestnut Hill in Newton. She is board certified in OBGYN and has a subspecialty in reproductive endocrinology and infertility, and she will be our third speaker. And on that note, I'm going to hand over the floor to Kristen Darcy so she can share her story.
Thank you. It's so nice to be here, and thank you so much for having me. So like Jennifer said, my name is Kristen Darcy. And I have had a rough couple of years, and I'll share a little bit about my story and how I got to where I am today. When I was in my late 20s, I had found a lump in my breast and thought, ugh, that's not me. Despite having a mother who had had breast cancer, it wasn't going to be me. And I just went about my business and I blamed it on my cycle. I blamed it on stress and went about it. And then one day I was driving and a neon sign lit up in front of me at an OB/GYN's office that I had never been to. And it was literally like pink Christmas lights around it, being like, you have to come, you have to come. And I went in, and long story short, sure enough, a few weeks later, I was sitting in an oncology office at Dana-Farber. I was single. I had just turned 30, or a month away from turning 30. And not once did my fertility ever come up in conversation. My conversations were all about, how are we going to save your life? What are we going to do? What are the steps for that? And that was my battle. That was my war. And I only cared about fighting for my life. But when I sat down one day and really thought about how I was feeling and how much this was weighing on me and the emotional stress that comes with cancer and cancer treatment, I realized, what am I fighting for? What is this life I want to live? And I realized the only thing I want to do with my life is become a mother. And now I'm halfway through chemo and I've never even thought about my fertility. I never thought about the choices that I could have made, that I will have to make. And so really then my journey began about saving myself for the life I wanted to live. And so after some conversations with my oncologist, my ship had already sailed as far as, preservation. And so I fought the fight, knowing that the reason I wanted to live was to be a mother. And, a couple of years later, I was ready to, or cleared to start trying. And it wasn't going anywhere. I struggled with how my body was failing me again, how choices had been taken away from me. I, at the time, had a male doctor, and I think he saw me as a single girl who didn't even, like, what would she make an embryo with?
Right.
And got put in that category, and then had to dig my way out. I found a female oncologist and a female OB/GYN, and I was like, we're doing this. This is what I want. And then a few weeks later, I met my husband. We went on a blind date. I was still in treatment, and it changed how we fought my battle. It changed how we fought cancer. And when we started trying, we had no luck. And I was faced with you have, unexplained infertility. And I'm like, pretty sure I can explain it. But it just felt like another letdown, and I felt lonely, and I felt scared, and I felt like I fought so hard to stay alive for what? I wasn't going to get my dream. I hadn't saved any eggs. I didn't have any embryos. It was, staring down a barrel. It felt terrible. And then I found Resolve New England, and I was like, that's cool. Maybe that'll be me someday. Maybe I can join one of their groups. But they didn't have a group that worked for me. And so we kept fighting. And after, numerous, retrievals and transfers and the struggle and war that is infertility, we finally conceived our first child. And I went to a in-person Resolve support group for expecting mothers after infertility. And after that first meeting, the leader of the group was like, you don't feel like you fit in here, do you? And I was like, well, I have my cancer support friends, and I guess I have infertility support friends, but that's two parts of me, and I'm a whole person.
Right.
And sort of that's how the Resolve Cancer and Fertility Support Group came about, and really where I felt the most centered and the most complete in both my journeys, because they were intertwined for me. It was, it was a long war that was broken into battles for me, and I couldn't see that until I sort of got to the other side. So here I sit, almost 8 years out now, and I have 3 living children. I have been pregnant almost a dozen times. And I feel now that going through cancer and going through infertility have made me a badass mother. But also, I feel compassion now for these 2 parts of my identity that have really merged together, and the struggle that they both were, and how hard it is to find someone to see you as a whole person and to see both of those things and let them both be true at the same time.
Right.
So,
Wow.
I am happy to answer more specific questions and share more, but that's sort of the Reader's Digest version of how I got here and why I'm here now.
Well,
And I think I'll add with the last bit, the greatest joy I have now is every time I send my oncologist a picture of my children, a picture of their birth, of me pregnant, of us expecting another one, and sharing them grow up. I'm here for every single part of that. I have carried 3 children. I have fought so many battles to be pregnant and now a mother. And I get the most joy out of sharing it with her because she helped me live so that I could live the life I wanted to. Kind of a full circle moment. Or at least I think she thinks so too when I text her and she sends me a heart emoji back.
Well, I don't even know what to say after that, honey, because, you know, the strength and your fortitude and your example that you're just sharing, you know, there was a time in the beginning of my training to be, you know, help walk side by side with women who unfortunately suffer, you know, both cancer and infertility. You know, there's a statistic that says women going through infertility have the same amount of stress and anxiety as women going through cancer. And when I have a referral of someone who's doing both, you know, preserving and fighting at the same time, you know, I can't imagine the amount of stress that that body is under by simultaneously, you know, trying to destroy what's happening inside and create an outside.
Yeah.
So what I have learned is just to be in awe of women who walk that, because you are inspiration. You know, you are, you know, a hand up for a woman behind. You know, there's nothing more beautiful than women supporting each other when there's a crisis that drives you to your knees. And that's why I'm so grateful for relationships with Dr. Zimon, because we have knowingly and unknowingly been on the right and left side of, you know, walking with our clients. You know, sometimes because of HIPAA we know, and sometimes we don't. But I think the most important thing is to just have this platform to say, if you receive this information, if you're in the middle of this battle, if you're coming to the end, you are supportive, you know, you're supported. There is resources, there is a team, you know, there is a team for the whole of you. Because what you spoke about, you know, I hear from my clients who are experiencing both, but also from, I'm sure Dr. Zion, Alison hears it too, that you're not you're not whole. You know, there's a belief that you're not whole because something organic or something as natural as being in a body that's healthy, you know, not in crisis. So I think what I love about your genuine sharing is that it's real. You know, it is a real struggle. It is a real battle. And there are wars that you know, you fight and you are victorious.
And
That's,
sometimes they're just little battles. You may lose 1 or 2, but you win the war.
yeah. I think,
Kristen, that's so amazing what you've shared with us. And I'm really interested to hear. I mean, it's amazing that you now are devoting a lot of your time, not only to your children and your family and your work, but, doing this support for, women who and people who might be in a similar situation. I'm curious how you feel, because I think we all sensed that years ago, exactly what you talked about was very prevalent, that when a cancer diagnosis was given, the other big issues in life, and some of it's reproduction, some other things, just weren't focused on. And I'm really curious to see, if you feel that that's changed a lot. You may not know because you experienced it, thank goodness, only once. But, what are your thoughts on that? Do you think that, my opinion is that people like you have really advocated for how important this is. And there's been a lot of education of the doctors, really, to make sure that, if you get if you are in the chair and you're making a diagnosis of cancer for somebody, be it a gynecologist, be a primary care doctor, whatever your specialty is, it's really important to take a look at the whole person. I love that you talk about that language and see, well, what are their life goals? And if, reproduction is part of this, how can you, focus on that in parallel? I'm curious what your thoughts are on that, looking back on it now so many years from
Yeah,
then.
I mean, I think it also helps that science keeps evolving, right? Like the choices that women have now to find out if they're BRCA positive or what have you, they're finding out at a much younger age. And I think those conversations are happening more organically in the doctor's office, like, hey, I'm 22 and I may or may not get cancer. What are my choices? I think those conversations have made big strides in the medical community. But I think for someone like me, who was just sat down with, no other things going on, let's say, it didn't even cross my mind. I was more like, will I have a future?
Yeah.
And because I think I wasn't able to advocate for myself right out the beginning, my window was taken. Had someone said, what are your life goals? I probably would have been like, yeah, I'd like to be a parent someday. I mean, I was almost 30. I'm pretty sure I knew.
Yeah.
But I think that really changes the dynamic too. The fact that the science keeps finding women, especially in the breast cancer world, much sooner. And I'm sure that's across the board with any other cancer diagnosis. But I think having the moment to be like, we will fight for your life. What is the life you want? Would have been a great conversation. What do I hear from other group attendees? I think a lot of them are maybe a little bit more self-advocating already for themselves. And I think, partly the pandemic changed that too. Like people need to know what's going on with their bodies and are a lot more in tune with what's happening. I think that really helped women. I think that a lot of women are just too scared.
Mm-hmm.
Like what if they tell me I'm not going to have a future to think about these things? I think that asking the questions, you may not like the answer you get. And so why ask the question?
Yeah. And, I have a follow-up question for both of you, actually. So you're in that moment, and I'm sure people who listen to this and are listening to this would, maybe be unfortunately in this moment where you have, this hugely stressful diagnosis of cancer, and maybe it has come to your, to your thinking that, your fertility preservation is another thing you should be thinking about. It's a lot to take on, what would be your tips? I think for both of you, maybe you could start, Kristen Darcy, first, in terms of, managing so much, where you're just, you're even just trying to keep yourself calm because you're so worried about the future, and to take that on. And, naturally, I see people in that space, right? Because I usually get involved when someone's seriously thinking about that. I'm not usually the one that's, making the suggestion, because usually I'm the person that's, helping with the fertility preservation piece. But it's a very overwhelming moment to be having doctor's appointments in both places and trying to deal with that. So I'm curious what your guidance is, for people in that space. And again, both of you it'd be really great to hear what you have to say about that.
I mean, I think the more we talk about IVF, the more we talk about assisted reproduction, the better we are, because I don't know that a lot of women know that it's a choice, or at least, 10 years ago, it wasn't on my radar that was like something I could do. So I think the more we spread the word, I think that if you sit with something and it just becomes common knowledge, if the more we talk about miscarriage, the more we talk about IVF, the more we talk about infertility and what your choices are for your body, makes it an easier conversation to have with a medical professional. I think it's just hard. And I think that someone needs to hold their hands and say, you may not be thinking about this, and it may feel overwhelming when we mention it to you, but here are some things that you could maybe think about if your situation allows, and sort of just lead that conversation a little bit. I think there needs to be some hand holding and someone taking the driver's seat.
Yeah, I agree. I agree that it's really important to have a wing person, to have an extra set of ears in the room, that you have someone else if you can't, have the strength to advocate for yourself. And one of my go-to strategies is really, first creating the space to have that emotional response to this and be okay with, whatever or however it comes out. And then, take a beat. Dr. Zimon is so good at, you're so thoughtful that, I think you downplay your importance. Like you said, when you say people come to you, but they're sometimes still in the gathering information mode.
Yeah.
That's
That's probably true. Yeah, that they are. And, and it's helpful too for me, just to sort of piggyback on that, to kind of know what it's like from someone like you, Kristen, and, as a coach, both Kristens. I'm sorry, it's hard for me to, mention who I'm talking about. So I hope I'm making it clear to everybody. What would be, I think people in a situation like that have some ideas about, what I would, how I could manage this if I were to do it again, and then how I would ask other people to help me, and I think that's the medical professionals. That's the thing that I think, is important to hear a little bit about, what's most helpful. And I think, Kristen, it's great what you said about having a wing person or have someone there, because my experience, as a clinical provider, is that there's so much information, so much to think about. And I just found that they're able to retain a lot of information is going to be limited, because you're just overwhelmed by so many thoughts and so many uncertainties.
Well, I think my job is to help go through the emotions and make decisions strategic. And that's why, CCRM is so open to having that team, holistic approach to getting that heart desire, even if you don't know at this moment if you want to be a mom or if you want to be a dad. How would it look, feel, and be to take those steps to preserve your fertility? And, it is a unique journey for everyone. It is an emotionally unique, journey to deal with the uncertainty of this whole, stinky situation, heartbreaking situation. So I think go ahead. Sorry, honey.
No, go ahead.
No, I think first having a wing person, first being, empowered to say no to some people, and have those clear boundaries, and, to create this plan of how, kind of like a hierarchy of what you need right at that moment. Your situation was so eloquently shared that you didn't, you're thrown into the deep end of the pool, and you're paddling away trying to figure out how to get there, get where you need to go. But I
And I
think,
think for me too, not having the choice of fertility preservation, had I had that choice, what would I want that conversation to look like? I think I would want someone to phrase it as in like, this is the blessing, like this is something you get to do for your future that you will have. Like, it's so easy to spin that in my mind as a positive. Yes, it's a very big medical procedure and there's so many components to it, and it's utterly exhausting and taxing in every sense of the word, but it's lucky and it's an option. And I think that could maybe take that sting of like, oh my gosh, I have more doctor's appointments, I have more, like, this could be seen as like, yay, I'm fighting for this. Had I had that choice, I think that would have made me feel a lot better about it being, like I said, another battle or a war or something I had to fight. I would have seen it more like something I got to do, like a privilege.
That's interesting. And I see that, and I see a lot of people who come with a parent, because, unfortunately, a lot of people were young, like you were, 30. I mean, that's just incredible. I know some people are thinking about building their family at 30, but most people aren't, in this time and age. And, I did find, and I do find that, that positive spin that you're talking about, I guess it's hard for me as a provider to really, appreciate how important that is, because, you can't help but feel like compassion for this person who's going through it. And you're sort of sad for them because they have to deal with this terrible diagnosis. And I think the uncertainty, I mean, like, not knowing if you're going to live, like, who can deal with that? That's like bigger than anything, right? But I think as you say that, I noticed that people and the parent or the patient themselves felt like this was something they had at least some control over. And
yeah.
it was very positive because while they were doing all their fertility treatment, they were making this work and they were scheduling it, and they walked away with some eggs in the freezer. And just like the title of the Seeds of Hope, I mean, that's really what it felt like to them. And it's nice that, you're saying that that's helpful too, to kind of frame it in that way, that it's a very, positive and lucky thing, because I think that's nice. That's motivating for people. And I never want anyone to feel like they have to do egg freezing or embryo freezing. I always want to feel like it's not a pressure. You don't have to do that. It's if it's a fit for you. But you definitely want to give them that chance at that lucky opportunity, right? And make it easy for them. So that's a really, really cool way to look at it. I have just one other question that really struck me that you said, Kristen, that you said a couple times, and there was this repeating cycle of your body failing you, is the way you said it. And that's also hard for someone who's not living that to know what that feels like. And that seems like hard, right? That you are living in your body and then it feels like it's failing you, right? And I guess that's another key thing. I'm curious, kind of your guidance on those feelings, and how the healthcare world can help you, and then how framing it and working with other support people, how they can help with that very difficult feeling.
Those feelings are still very raw for me.
Yeah.
I have felt those, like I said, I'm almost 10 years out, and they still stink. It really is something I don't think I've even come to terms with, because I feel like as far out I get, I feel healthy. I don't worry. I am off all medication. Like, my life is, for all intents and purposes, normal. I'm a healthy adult. But there are so many things that have come post that have really made me feel like a failure again. And it really stemmed from that beginning, not having choices and not having any say, except for, yes, I do like to live. That would be good. Let's work on that. And sort of once I got over the fact that, my body was trying to kill me, you almost put that out of your mind and you're like, okay, we're going to fight. We're fighting. And then you fight and you're sort of done. And then you're like, okay, that happened. And then you get another diagnosis of infertility, or, anything else. And you're just like, how dare you? I worked so hard to keep you afloat. And now you've gone and done this to me. And then, I mean, we struggled with infertility for quite a while. Like I said, almost a dozen pregnancies. And that kept stinging. And it still stings every time someone talks about a rainbow baby. Like there's so many things now that are sort of okay to talk about a little bit that remind me how my body failed me. When my daughter was born and the doctor held her up and they're like, it's a girl. And I hysterically sobbed because my daughter had nipples and I didn't. And that never dawned on me. It was a complete disconnect. And then I realized, oh my gosh, now my body is failing her. I do not look the same as my child. I'm happy to be alive to have her, but like it just like little things like that kept coming up in the years. And I still worry about little things like that. You know, my kids are asking why I look different. And, you know, it's just a reminder that my body failed and I can't fix that. Like I can't, even though I'm okay now, I still don't feel like I fixed that part of my journey, I guess you could say. So I have zero advice other than it's still really hard. And I don't know that I'll ever shake that. And maybe I shouldn't, but the struggle is real on that one for me.
Yeah. And Kristen, you must see this in a lot of the people you talk with, right? You know, and I mean, I hear this a lot, you know, that's a very common, you know, sort of sense of the body and how it's not doing what it should be doing. You've been kind to it. Why isn't it returning the favor, right?
Right.
You know?
Kind of this at odds with your own self. Like I understand only a little bit of this because of, you know, part of my journey, I have physical scars, you know, and it took me a long time to come to peace with that and kind of speak to that part because I was still kind of angry that I didn't have the journey I thought I was going to have. And I write about it in one of my books and I can't remember, but it was like there was one point when I thought to myself, I was so angry at my body for failing me, you know, for, you know, repeatedly, not to the extent that you experienced, of course, because my story is different than yours. And it was almost the gratitude for putting these requirements on my body and overlooking everything that it was doing, you know, like overlooking that it was hyperstimulating and I had all these, you know, follicles and I was just so focused on not having a pregnancy, but every cycle that I did, it was responding, you know, it was listening and it, you know, it was trying and I was still upset because, you know, there was a failure at the end of the month. And so it took a long time for me to create a sense of harmlessness for myself, you know, to hold myself, my thoughts, you know, my actions and my words inside and outside about my body. You know, and then, you know, it's not what we're talking about when you get to be a woman of my certain ages, there's changes and you can still see it and coming around. And what I do is just acknowledge that feeling. Oh, there I am again, you know, super critical. You know, this body has been through a lot, you know, I'm not in any way, you know, experiencing what you did, but just the disconnect to the gratitude of what it had done. And I'm not saying it's you, but that was me, you know. And how do you become friends again with yourself? You know, how do you hold that your wholeness and kindness? I think women in general have a really difficult time being kind to ourselves. You know, being like we should be doing more. Or you know, I'm in awe of you, Kristen, listening to your story. You know, and everything that you went through and everything you do. So that goes back to like, you know, I'm still in practice of being grateful, even in those moments of things that you could awfulize. You know, I'm still learning. I think, you
Yeah,
know,
I think that's really true. I mean, that's one of the reasons I give back at Resolve New England. You know, I feel akin to the women that come to these groups and the couples that come to cancer and fertility and their plight. You know, it's not for the faint. And I think having someone who gets it and is in your corner and is just, you know, able to listen with empathy and sympathy, and it makes a big difference. It
it's,
really does. And in healing myself, you know, I think I have come a lot further along since working with Resolve. You know, and back to your point, Dr. Zimon, about, you know, your body failing you. I think too, specifically for me and the type of breast cancer I had, you know, shooting yourself up with a lot of hormones isn't really advised. And so that felt really scary too. Being pregnant felt really scary with all of those hormones. And I think that was very isolating too. You know, I wasn't just a regular infertility patient and I wasn't a regular pregnant person. And I think what Kristen Darcy was saying too, that disconnect and trying to find the grace and the wholeness is something I'm still working on, but something I'm really working on and striving for.
I think collectively we feel like it should be done, like a one and a done. Like, okay, I experienced this horrific tragedy and I should be over it. And then on those moments when it comes around and you have those familiar feelings, you're like, oh God, not this again. I thought, you know, this
Yeah,
was
the
over.
whiplash.
Yeah. And I think, you know, there's, for me, I still practice that. Like it comes around and I'm like, oh, I'm gratefully sad. I'm so sad when all the pregnancy losses come around, you know, and you don't even really put that together. And so I think we need to just be kinder to ourselves and know that it's not one and done. You know, something triggers something as a memory in your body to come out to, you know, to be loved and healed and in the light. And I
And
think
I think there's
having,
a lot of advocacy that happens in that space.
Right.
I think that's where advocacy comes in.
I think that, you know, yeah, I mean, you know, to summarize, I again, thank you for so much for sharing your story, Kristen. It was really well told and really powerful for, I think, all of us. You know, I think we were all taken very much by your honesty, and everything you said, like Kristen said, it just, we felt like we could understand it because you were so crisp in how you said it, that it felt very, very real and helpful to people. So I hope that, you know, one lesson is that people really do hear that all those feelings are very real and shared in some ways. Everybody's got their own story, and that, you know, there is a lot of power in connecting with someone like you in support groups. And it's kind of interesting to hear that, you know, there's something to be gained about advocacy. You know, all of us, maybe some people listening are on the other side of this and also are thinking about, you know, sharing their story and helping others, you know, through Resolve or other ways. I think there's a lot of resources. You know, Resolve has a lot of resources, groups like you do. I think, you know, what Kristen does, many approaches, you know, to just sort of working on your wholeness, yourself, nurturing your mind and your spirit. And there's lots of practices, you know, Kristen lives and breathes it, but also is a really great coach. And there are a lot of resources for people, because I'm sure, you know, there were moments where there was nothing. What could you do? How could you calm yourself down? Where to go? Like, what do I do tonight? And even trying to make these very difficult decisions about what you said, taking hormone treatments that you worry, is that going to, you know, affect your livelihood and your ability to survive, and that dilemma, and are you doing the right thing, you know, for whatever your future is. All of that is very, very complex. And I think from the physician standpoint, you know, it's really important to know that all these, what Kristen and Kristen are sharing, are very real and very prevalent. And that, you know, if your doctor isn't hearing that you should let them know that you have a voice. And we've said that before many times. But, you know, it is very important to be able to say, whoa, you're giving me too fast, this is too overwhelming, or to say, you know what, I learned about egg freezing, I don't want to do it, or you know what, I can't take this on, or this is amazing, I feel really happy, this is the one thing I can do and I feel lucky, and you know, can you make this a positive thing with me? And so you know, everybody approaches this very differently, but no one can really understand what it's like, you know, to be in someone else's shoes. But I think you can really speak, I would hope, to your team, and you found people that you felt that you could relate to. And I think that's another thing too, is that you can find, you know, Kate isn't on the call, you know, who heads up Resolve, but she always talks about finding your people, and it's not just your cohorts and the people who are actually going through a similar experience, but it's the professionals too, right? It's the professionals that you work with, and making sure you find people that really help you. So I just think that this is really eye-opening, and you know, I do believe that when people hear someone who has a story that touches and resonates with their own, it's so powerful, and it's like, it's healing like nothing else, you know. So you doing this is really incredible, and I just encourage people to reach out to Resolve if this is a group that is going to be a fit, and see if, you know, these kind of avenues of support are going to fit for you. And that's also going to empower you to make the right decisions in your care, and to get the right win people, and to make sure you get the right care team. Is it your oncology team? Is it your surgeon? Is it your fertility specialist? All these people. And you have to, unfortunately, work quickly, but you know, these people are there right in, you know, at a drop of a hat too. So just wanted to see, Jen, are there any questions that you wanted to address or put out to the group before we close?
We don't have any questions, but I just wanted to say, Kristen, it was so nice to hear your story, and it's an honor, and thank you for sharing.
Oh, thank you for giving me this space. I think that it's healing for me, and I am so deeply grateful for that.
Yeah. Well, that's beautiful. Well, I think you inspired all of us, right? I think, you know, it's just, it's healing for us, right? Because, you know, someone strong like you makes us stronger and feel like, you know, wow, that's really inspiring, right? And we, you know, so thank you again. You know, you could have chosen to keep this all quiet, and instead you share it and really give back to the world. And we're glad that it's something that you enjoy to do. And
well, thank you for being a professional that cares, you know, that not few and far between, but the more we hear, the more we know.
Right.
It means a lot to us too.
Yeah. So great.
Well, yeah, so there are no questions, but I didn't know if you wanted to wrap it up. And Kristen Darcy, if you had anything, closing notes. Kristen Darcy, no?
Oh, I was the other Kristen.
I know. 2 KDs.
I think there's a gap when people receive this diagnosis like Kristen shared, and you know, we're talking about women, but for men, you know, the men partner who gets a diagnosis of cancer, you know, there really is, you know, support out there too. So I
we welcome them at this. I mean, a lot of our participants are the spouse of someone who has cancer and is going through infertility.
Right. And so there's, you know, so there is, you know, there is support if you're a male who has received the cancer diagnosis. So that's all. Thank you so much. I so appreciate your inspiration, and thank you, Dr. Zimon.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. And thanks, Jen, for coordinating this. It was really nice to get this together.
You're welcome.
Yeah, and all the best to you, Kristen, and your 3 kids and your family and your health. And, you know, I think you have a lot of fans already, you know, rooting for you. So we wish you all the best.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Zimon. Thank you.